Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to KNDI ATRI Live. So today we're going to begin with a simple food for thought. When we are deciding what to feed the babies, how do we know that we've made an informed and confident choice? Nowadays, a lot of parents get access to information online, which ultimately affects their decision on what to feed the baby. So today, we are joined with the Chief Executive Officer of Kenya Nutritionists and Dietitians Institute, Dr. David Omondi Okeyo, who's going to talk about Breastmilk Substitute Act. Dr. Okeyo spearheads the regulation of nutrition and dietetics in Kenya, ensuring that gold standards are set. Welcome, Dr. You can proceed to give us a brief overview, but before you do that, I can see we have a very nice, can I say award, just next to you. Can you please tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, I like the way you have described it, Laura. You said a very nice award. You know, sometimes when things are valuable, even the name gets lost sometimes. This is purely an award, as you have suggested. You know, just or last week on Saturday, you know what happened at Safari Park. We actually received as an institute, of course, led by me, an award that is called Pan-Africa Leadership Excellent Award.
Yes.
This is on matters of nutrition leadership when it comes to public health nutrition and regulatory framework strengthening. So this is what puts KNDI now beyond Kenya. We are now in the global arena in terms of service delivery, and it is very good. We are very happy with it, and that's why I've decided we put it on the table.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Laura. We can go business.
Thank you.
Okay.
So nutrition is a global champion.
Now, Kenya Nutritionists and Dietitians Institute is a global champion, and Dr. Okeyo is actually a global trailblazer.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's kindly give us a brief overview.
Yes, Laura, today I think this is a very, very important topic, which is very much in the deep of my heart when it comes to matters of setting standards in nutrition and dietetics.
Yes.
And I want to say so because it is falling within the nutrition for babies framework, and particularly from birth to 1,000 days. The most important period in the life of a human being. That is the first 1,000 days of life. And so feeding at that particular point is very, very important because of the brain development and, of course, issues to do with growth. Any mess within that period can cause a disaster in the life of a child in terms of cognitive development and even also in terms of general health status in the future. So that is why we want to talk about the Breastmilk Substitute Act. By the way, the actual name is the Breastmilk Substitute Regulations and Control Act 2012. Which of course is a parliamentary act in this nation.
Yes.
Which was done in line with the WHO code recommendations.
Okay.
And I think we were so fast to come up with this act. Very, very good. The purpose was to promote exclusive breastfeeding and also continued breastfeeding for purposes of handling maternal and young child nutrition within the 1,000 days. And I have before me here 2 documents.
Yes.
I have the act itself, which is the Breastmilk Substitute Regulation Control Act 2012. And I also have Breast Milk Substitute Regulation Control General Regulations 2020, which actually was passed by Parliament for purposes of strengthening the implementation of the original act. So those 2 documents will be guiding our conversation today. And I want to say one thing, that before we get into that, it would be good to give you some statistics.
Yes.
So the public actually need to know this, and particularly our professionals, and also extending to the general health professionals that are handling children, like the nurses and any other. I want to say that one of the key things why Breast Milk Substitute Regulations and Control Act 2012 was brought on board was promotion of maternal and young child nutrition, which of course looks at the nutrition within 1,000 days, and particularly breastfeeding, where we talk about exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months if it is Kenya, and then continued breastfeeding up to 2 years. And of course, within the process, we also talk about the early initiation, where we talk about the first hour of birth. Now, from the time that this act was in place, we have seen quite good improvement from 2014. I know that before it was worse, but then we came to a coverage of exclusive breastfeeding of up to 60%. And if you look at Kenya, we have actually surpassed the recommended target, which was about 50% by the World Assembly that made a resolution about this code. Yes. Now, the unfortunate thing is that we have stagnated between 60% to 61% when it comes to exclusive breastfeeding, and that is because of many challenges. Now, I want to tie that with the fact that regional distribution, some places are even worse. Some have not reached 50%. I have just seen the statistics in the Nairobi area, for example. When you get to the Kibera slums, maybe by just in the near past, the coverage is 25.6%. And if you get to counties like Wajir, yes, you'll get it at 45.5%. So which means that even though we are at 60% nationwide, yes, there are regions that are still below the coverage for exclusive breastfeeding. We will talk about how is the best approach for that. Now, on the other side, I'm looking at the Breast Milk Substitutes Regulations and Control General 2020, which was a regulation that really called a lot of debate from the industry players, the professionals, and of course the key players, the Ministry of Health, that was spearheading the process. Now, up to that point, I would want to also disclose the fact that I am a member of the National Committee that is in charge of advisory and implementation of this act and regulation together. But also I want to talk as the CEO regulating the profession of nutrition and dietetics, which sets standards for nutrition and dietetics in the country, including standards related to breastfeeding. One thing that we must accept is the fact that when we talk about standards, then the professionals take lead. And so we see breastfeeding more of fitting in the professional framework of nutrition and dietetics compared to other cadres, even though it is a public health matter, which may call for other players like the nurses and of course the public health officers, if we were to strengthen the process. So I'll be talking about referring to this particular act as we move forward, so that we can make it clear to the professionals as now the regulator, what is our position when it comes to breastfeeding. And I want to say that I'm one of those professionals who want breastfeeding coverage, particularly exclusive breastfeeding, to reach 100% on the dot. So with that, it is important to clarify and say that this breast milk regulation and control, I think what informed it was aggressive marketing of companies that distribute these substitutes, which are alternatives. And the theory, if I'm not wrong, was the fact that we need to promote exclusive breastfeeding. And therefore, we do not want influence of a mother towards a substitute if that mother was in a position to breastfeed exclusively. And I think most mothers, over 80%, are able to breastfeed. Yes. And that is why these measures were brought in place as a control mechanism with the Act for purposes of enforcement. However, I would want to say that we cannot condemn the food companies, because where there is no breast milk breastfeeding possibility, when a mother is infected and therefore needs to be separated from the child to avoid any form of crossed or transfer of infections, then alternative food may be provided, and I think substitutes come in handy in that particular case. So we cannot condemn the substitutes at all, and we would want to encourage the food companies to continue with their business, even though we need ethical approach when it comes to marketing of such. The other thing is that if at all we have no substitute, we also need to look at the risk that chances are that some mothers may get to alternatives which are not necessarily from the food companies, but locally available, that has not been the focus for many, many years since this was implemented. For example, the cow milk. The cow milk is a substitute, indirectly not produced by a food company, but locally produced by cows, and it's meant for the cows. Yet we know that some dilute it for feeding our children. So I can stop there for now as I listen to your questions.
Okay. So the first question would be, how would you describe the Breast Milk Substitute Act?
Mhm.
Yes.
I think for me, I have described it fully. From what I've just said, is that this is an act of parliament, which, of course, if you look at its citation, it is breast milk substitute regulation and control, which means that the focus is to control the aggressive marketing of substitutes as alternative to milk for the baby. And this act was put in place by Parliament to promote exclusive breastfeeding, and of course continued breastfeeding up to 1,000 years. And sometimes also, it is also there to promote ethical use of complementary foods. That is from a general layman's perspective. The act actually is implemented by the Ministry of Health.
Yes.
And it is purely a cabinet secretary's act if you look at the objects. And the cabinet secretary has all jurisdiction to set up a committee that does the oversight for purposes of implementation. And we'll be going shortly into the structure of that committee. And also, the cabinet secretary also has a full right to set up other regulations that will make it be fully implemented, as well as appointing authorized officers that can enforce the implementation of this act. So the act is very simple: control aggressive marketing of substitute, as opposed to promoting exclusive breastfeeding and continued breastfeeding.
Okay.
Yes.
So now we've understood very well what Breast Milk BMS Act is. How effective is the committee that spearheads its implementation in terms of, is it well constituted?
Okay.
How often do they meet? Is it in place?
Okay. I want to say that since the institution of the Act, the
Yes.
BMS Act, the implementation has not been regular as it is expected, and it is not up to standard at all. In fact, if we were to score ourselves on this, I would actually give us a 30% score out of 100. And I want to say that even though I am purely inclusive in that particular blame, the problem is actually on the governance structure. And I want to be very categorical on this matter. Maybe if you allow me, I would want to take you straight to the formation and constitution of the committee, which is actually on part 2 of the Act under section 4. It is very clear that the Act gives the provisions of who is supposed to be part of that committee that will spearhead the implementation of this Act.
Yes.
And if you read through, you will see that the cabinet secretary shall establish a committee to be known as the National Committee on Infant and Young Child Feeding, which as at now, we assume that it has been done because there were some gazette notices for this committee.
Okay.
But I want to say that the constitution of this committee had some flaws in it. For example, if you read the act, the chair of this committee is supposed to be Director of Public Health. As I talk today, the chair of this committee is Director General. Now, unless the act is amended, the Director General cannot chair this meeting because this Director of Public Health is in existence in the Ministry of Health and therefore should be the one chairing this particular committee. Also, we know that the Director of Nutrition Services is the secretary to the committee. And then we have members coming from various institutions like Kenya Bureau of Standards, Kenya Medical Research, and also we have Director National Hospital, or a representative for that matter. The Registrar of Nursing Council is also a member or a representative. The chairman of the Kenya Pediatric Association, or a representative, and the chairperson of the institution representing nutritionists and his representative, where now I come in. Initially, when there was the formation of this regulation, we were left out, and so it became a concern. Because the argument of the Ministry of Health was that anybody chairing a group of associations could have sat in this committee, which means that you could pick a chairman of Nutrition Association of Kenya, or chairman of Nutrition Society of Kenya, or chairman of Clinical Nutrition, Kekona. But those are not statutory organizations. Kenya Nutritionists and Dietitians Institute is the one that convenes by registration and licensing all nutritionists in the country and regulates them. And therefore, being a statutory body was the right person to be here. Later on, I think this was properly done, and they gave a space for Kenya Nutritionists and Dietitians Institute after all these were done. Okay. Then we have also the chairperson of institutions, representative nominated by various bodies for the appointment by cabinet secretary, like the private health institutions and also non-governmental institutions. And then we have the representative of the principal secretary and 2 members with the relevant expertise in infant and young child feeding program. Now, what I would want to say is that if you look at this membership, it's actually, it needs to be amended because currently it violates the minimum prescribed number for board when it comes to corporate governance. Okay. We only need 9 members to implement this act. No wonder we have a problem. Now, having said that, I can say that the Director of Nutrition Services, being the secretary, then forms the secretariat. But there is no secretariat that can work without a structured organogram. That is why the implementation is not effective. Because if you read this act in details, you'll find that the act also specifies that the committee shall be meeting at least 4 times in a year. From the time that our appointments were made, I would want to tell you that we have not had any structured meetings. And that is why this act cannot be implemented. Now, if you find any meeting taking place, which is all-inclusive meeting, particularly when it comes to the committee meeting, leave alone the committees, you will realize, the subcommittees, you'll realize that the meetings are only organized when there is a availability of funds from a partner. Yet, in section 9, the act is very clear that the expenses of this committee shall be met out of funds provided by Parliament for that purpose, which means that there should be a funding budget for this particular committee for it to be efficient and effective. And this must be implemented from the ministry. So the committees need to regularize their meetings and all their expenses be met, including the expenses for the secretariat. So number one, it is not effective committee because it does not have a structure on how it is supposed to be implemented. Because the board or the committee itself
Yes.
is supposed to do oversight and come up with various advisory on matters of policy. But the secretariat should do day-to-day operations, so that they must have head of secretariat. While the director of nutrition services is the secretary to the committee, she's the appropriate head of secretariat, and she must have technical officers that are given various implementation sectional units and funded by Parliament. So I am not sure whether there is any budget like this that has been formulated by the committee or proposed by the committee to help this committee operate. That is why they have done 30% in my own thinking. So it is not effective. And I will be giving how I would wish that it be reorganized to become effective.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So we've seen how some of the gaps and challenges that the committee is facing while implementing the act. So what are some of the strategies that probably you could advise?
You see, as a member of the committee, if we had a regular annual schedule for committee meetings as prescribed by the Act, where we say every quarter we are sure that there would be a meeting and notices are properly served
Yes.
to each committee member, then I would have the opportunity to advise the secretariat and also the ministry through a board resolution how effective this committee would be in the implementation. At the moment, for the few meetings that I've attended, the focus is on how can we stop food industry from marketing the substitute. There has never been anything else discussed apart from that would make us go outside there and promote breastfeeding. And my own skills as a professional is not about fighting the opponent. It's about educating the opponent on what they're supposed to do. Okay. It's also about positive promotion, which is not taking place. We have a lot of things to do to promote breastfeeding in the country. But you'll find that most of the time, the implementing group, yes, and particularly the Secretariat and the Ministry of Health in general, as inclusive, we only wait when there is a breastfeeding day. Yeah. So when the breastfeeding day is when you'll see within a full week, people are very active with the promotion of breastfeeding. Yes. While this thing is supposed to be a continuous process running all throughout the year. The promotion is not for a show to go and demonstrate how you can promote breastfeeding. It's supposed to be a daily activity in our health facilities. The professionals themselves are supposed to be spearheading the implementation. Okay. The governing bodies at the county and national government are supposed to be promoting breastfeeding. There should be innovative structures in place at the Secretariat that send critical messages to everybody in the country on why it is important to exclusively breastfeed, in partnership with the agencies like Safaricom and Airtel or any other bulk SMS that can be used in the promotion. We have general media, mainstream media, where we can promote exclusive breastfeeding throughout the year. We have broadcast areas like the KNDI Broadcasting Live can promote that the way I have started. You don't have to wait for the breastfeeding day and then do theatrics and begin to call everybody. We are breastfeeding day is approaching, World Breastfeeding Day, so we want people to promote breastfeeding. No, these things should be structured, and the committee should be seen to be oversighting the process and advising the cabinet secretary as envisaged in the law, which means therefore the secretariats must have a very clearly drawn and set up organogram where the committee can input on matters to do with expenses and budget, which then must be submitted alongside other budgets, just like other departments do in the ministry. And it should be funded by Parliament, because that is what the Act is saying. So that we do not depend on UNICEF to fund a meeting, for example, or a WHO to fund a meeting for the committee. So my main advice that would be appropriate for the implementation of this, step one, is to relook at the committee and institute that committee legally as prescribed within the Act. Number two is to set up an organogram structure for the secretariat that is standing and can have an observable workflow from the committee to the secretariat, from the secretariat to the committee, and from the committee resolution to the cabinet secretary. So that organogram must be set up and drawn carefully. Three, there must be a relook at the Act itself. Instead of going around by coming up with regulations in an attempt to change the Act, the best is to amend the Act and even reconstitute the committee so that, one, it's aligned to the state corporations guideline, which is Mwongozo, where the board members should not be more than 9. And then we give the right technical group to lead as chairs so that we can identify a technical person that can chair this, who has passion and has technical know-how on maternal and young child nutrition. And then now the ministry should take up this unit just like any other department in the ministry to ensure that this is properly done in collaboration with the county government. When that is done, then we'll be promoting breastfeeding throughout the year. But if it still goes with the partner deciding on what we are supposed to do, when the Act itself tells us what we are supposed to do, then we are far from the implementation. And so we'll be stagnating at 60%, just like it has been from 2014 to date. We have gone down, we have come up, but we are remaining between 60 to 61% coverage, which should not be the case. Now, in this case, we are not supposed to blame the food industry when they're coming up with substitute. We need them when it comes to demand, when cases of breastfeeding becomes a risk where a mother cannot exclusively breastfeed, we need substitute. And even if we bar the food companies, it will not bring impact because we also have local household approaches to substitute that is not given focus. We have factors that are preventing mothers in the household from exclusively breastfeeding, which are not necessarily substitute. Those are the areas that we need to educate mothers and promote it throughout the period of service. So the focus should not be bar them from marketing. Yes, we know that the code is very clear on aggressive marketing. We know the Act is very clear on aggressive marketing, relationship with the health professionals and donations. It is very clear. It is something that the food companies need to be told you have to adhere to this and you have to conform. Otherwise, enforcement will take place. But that should not be the focus for the committee. The focus for the committee is enhancement, promotion, trying to set up budgetary items that would help the committee to go deeper into the grassroots to ensure that the breastfeeding is promoted throughout the year. And then also giving feedback to cabinet secretary and to parliament on the status of breastfeeding, not fighting food companies or fighting with health professionals that relate with food companies. Those ones can be enforced by the regulators like us, for example, within the code of ethics for practice. So this is something that must be taken very seriously. And I think me as one of the champions, as a professional and also a member of the committee, I would want to make this one very clear on the table with the committee together with the secretariat in the Ministry of Health. And where this is not working, we'll have to address it with the cabinet secretary who has the overall responsibility and powers to execute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Okeyo. That was very elaborate. Maybe just to dive a little bit deeper, how does the Act guide the interaction between companies, health facilities, and professionals?
You see, I want to bring you to the attention of the original Act. If you look at the original Act, it is very clear on advertisement, promotion, under Part 3 of packages, and labeling of packages and educational and informational materials.
Yes.
Now, when you look at this, it was already a regulation which was prohibiting advertisement and promotion. And any professionals need to have this Act and exactly read to see how they would relate with the food companies, how the companies would relate with professionals, and how the companies would market their products without necessarily influencing the mothers. So the Act is very clear under Section 6, and Section 6 Part 2 is very detailed on what is supposed to be done in terms of that prohibition and advertisement. And I think that is where the committee need to focus on. Now, realizing that this section was not detailed enough on the how, they came up with the ministry came up with the general regulation, which now gives details of exactly the step-by-step approach. Now, this step-by-step approach can only be implemented if the secretariat is organized in a structure of governance that is effective. And this has not been done. So it will also be just another paper in addition to this particular Act. So what needs to happen is that the health professionals, I cannot get into the details and tell them how they are supposed to relate. But the regulation general, which is 2020, has all the details on how a health professional should interact with a food company that is manufacturing and distributing substitute. The same applies to educational materials. And that is purely expanding the Act. But my overall stake is that you cannot use regulation to change an Act of Parliament. You cannot try to use regulation to amend the Act. The best approach is to amend the Act to be very clear, and then provide standard operating procedures which can be followed to implement that particular Act. And some of the things that have been included in the regulation are purely new things, which are not mentioned or expanding any section of the Act. So the best is to first amend this Act and give it a focus. And then the secondly is to give the implementation tool in terms of policies and of course regulations like what has been done already. But it should not be used as a tool to amend the Act. So with this, then there will be all-inclusive public participation, where the professional themselves can also give the best way to promote breastfeeding without necessarily fighting those who are in the market, that have a space also to do business and contribute towards nation building in terms of paying of taxes and employment of expertise, and also employment of our nutritionists. So that is why what I can tell you about the relationship between food company, the professionals, and of course the marketers and the health facilities. Yes, it is very clear in the Act. And every professional must have these two documents and read them carefully. But then also, the implementer should not think that this is a tool now to start fighting with food companies. And they should know that we have a free trade, and the Ministry of Trade is working very hard for us to get investors. And those investors must be ethical. So fighting them on just a small matter instead of promoting breastfeeding is not viable. So let us engage in promotion. Let us get to Parliament, tell them to provide money for this committee. Let the ministry have a budget allocation that is very specific for this committee, as it is in the Act. Justify it by allowing the committees to bring areas that they would want to implement activities that are going to promote breastfeeding, and then get the committee to work. If the committee cannot work, they don't need to be there. And the committee should be very, very much vetted, so that we don't just look for our friends to bring them in the committee and they do a lot of nothing when the implementation process begins. We want to move away from sharing TikTok materials
Yes.
on walls of committee to discussing tangible things that will promote breastfeeding to reach 100% as envisaged with this, while also maintaining good relationship with the food industry when it comes to matters of breastfeeding and promotion. And then the last thing I would want to say,
Yes.
and this one I have to be very candid, there's no way you can be so stereotyped to an extent that if a food company offers to support a health facility, then you deny that food company because they are manufacturing food substitute. So you think that the food company is coming to promote substitute. When somebody comes to build even a breastfeeding court in a food company or in an organization which is for government, don't stop them. Let them build, but then be candid that this should not be meant to promote substitute.
Yes.
This one is meant to ensure that we are promoting exclusive breastfeeding for those who are working. That is number one. Number two, you cannot stop a PS if the PS is funded by a company that is producing substitute or engaging a substitute for a for an education forum or a conference that is going to bring more knowledge for the PS, and you confidentially say they are violating the act. That is stereotype. You should tell the PS to be present so that she can be candid, or he can be candid, to say that this is how we want the breast milk substitute to be implemented in Kenya. So these things you are telling us cannot work. You don't bar them from participating or associating with them. That is discriminatory. It cannot help the country. You get this?
Yes.
Yeah. And then lastly, I would want to say that the government of Kenya must now be serious when it comes to barriers like maternity leave, for example. You know, you cannot tell people or mothers to breastfeed exclusively for 6 months when we only have 3 months maternity leave. You're assuming that this mother will be running back to go and breastfeed, or you're assuming that all organizations will bring in a court and all the mothers will come with their children and they will work. So it is high time now the maternity leave, if we were to be serious, be pushed beyond 6 months of exclusive. After that, the mothers can plan their way. Me personally, I've seen how mothers here are struggling to run back and come. Sometimes I give them half a day work so that at least they can go back and breastfeed for 9 months. But this is not in any legal document. So the government of Kenya must now start thinking, how do we promote breastfeeding? Because nutrition within 1,000 days is very important. Yes. Let us move maternity leave from 3 months to 6 months. Then we will be talking sense. But if, as long as it is still 3 months, as much as we are going to promote breastfeeding in a work setting, it will not give peace to the mother, because the mother needs to be psychologically prepared and needs an environment where they can be comfortable. When they come from expressing, like I've seen here, when I put up a quote for the mothers to express, when they meet you on the corridors, their eyes are changing because they feel embarrassed. That should not be the case. So the government needs to increase the maternity leave. And still, to avoid any discrimination, the mothers must be allowed to go through that process without any form of employment discrimination. So they cannot be considered that you now want to employ more men than women because the women will be given maternity leave beyond 6 months. That is a risk that the government must take if this nation has to grow. And without those mothers, we will not have a nation. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So now, as we come to the end of today's session, maybe a closing remark to the Ministry of Health.
A closing remark to the Ministry of Health is that we must stop being reactive when it comes to implementation of programs that are are benefiting us constitutionally when it comes to the right to adequate food, which is entrenched in the Constitution. and also the right to quality healthcare. What I mean when I talk about this, I want to see that whenever we are given work to do,
Yes.
our focus should be the Kenyan Constitution. For example, Article 53 is very clear. Every child has a basic right, and it has a basic right to basic nutrition, shelter, and healthcare. And of course, the right to be free from hunger. We cannot forget it in Article 43. And finally, in the same Article 43 is talking about higher standards of healthcare. So when that has to be implemented, then once acts like this are in place, then they need to be studied. And then a structure be formulated that will implement it efficiently. And this structure, I would want that it starts with a clear organogram and clear gazettement or institution of committee members that will spearhead the process.
Okay.
If that is happening, even with it the way it is before amendment, the structure for governance can still be formulated with strict budgetary allocation and strict activity and work plan that will promote breastfeeding. So that's the message I want to pass. We must be accountable to the Constitution on matters of health of a child. And we must also build structures and governance that can promote, not reactive tools and reactive committees, the way we do when it comes to celebrating Breastfeeding Day. That's when you see people running around when they're supposed to be doing this all throughout the year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We've come to the end of today's session very firm and boldly. We've gotten to understand the Breast Milk Substitute Act and how we need to improve its implementation. So join us every Thursday, same day, same time, from your host, Wangara Laura. Goodbye.
Thank you.